During the break, we just talked about something here. Based on feelings and how you can look at someone and feel whether or not what they're doing is accurate or how inaccurate it is or how you think it feels to them. You see something in your body relates to that. Just like if you see somebody hit their finger with a hammer, your body tells you that hurts and you cringe from the pain. And the same goes if you see somebody doing an iron butterfly kick and yet it's all wrong. Your body feels that it's wrong before you see that it's wrong. And we mentioned that once your body can feel it, then the next step is to try to determine what it is about that particular person that doesn't feel right. And many times you can go through a lot of guesswork on feelings if you allow your body to try to mimic what that other person's doing so that you can come up with an accurate description of what's wrong. And what we concluded with is that if you have a list of rules or you understand the rules of a particular action, whether it be a kick or an attack or a form, then the first thing to do is apply the rules. Question? Apply the rules so that you can go through Rule 1, Rule 2, Rule 3 and eliminate what it might be that's causing the problem with the person's kick. We also mentioned that when you're going through the rules, start with the feet and work your way up. The first place you want to look if a kick is incorrect is the supporting leg. That generally is the first place that's going to cause all the rest of the problems. The next place is going to be the hip. Position of the hip is going to cause everything else. The next place is going to be the shoulders. Position of the shoulders is going to cause problems with the out or the kick. Last and least, the knee and then the foot. So don't work yourself backwards. Don't look at where the foot's going and wonder what the position the knee's in or the hip or something. Start at the bottom, work your way up. But it is important to feel it first and then react to that very quickly with rules. What makes something work. We added some information on philosophy that one of our philosophies is that we treat Kung Fu, Soma Kung Fu as a means to stay in shape. It is within itself an exercise. So therefore, our philosophy is we don't do calisthenics at the beginning of class. All right, let's get into forms, techniques, and sparring. And also want to touch on the body and the mind responsibilities. I know we talked about it a couple of times, but I want to push that on home. Let's start with forms. There are some styles that feel forms are completely unnecessary and that they were invented by somebody who wanted to keep the real stuff from his students and from the outside world, and therefore he could only show an elite few the real meaning behind his particular art. And there are those who think that forms teach you everything about the martial arts, and with forms you can do anything in and of themselves. Our philosophy is somewhat in between there, in that forms play a specific role, gives you an opportunity to use many of the skills and philosophies that makes a Soma what it is. For example, when you're doing forms, you have to use the concept of the body accepting responsibility for its actions and allowing the mind to stay ahead of the body movements. You have to use the philosophies of sound You have to use visualization skills. You have to work on minimizing and maximizing techniques. You have to work on the skills of tempo for defense and tempo for offense. You have to concentrate on being able to empty the mind and empty the eyes. So with the form, plus it is also a damn good exercise. With the forms, you have an opportunity in solo practice to go over so many of the things that gels a soma together. It's very important to practice the forms in such a way that you get something out of them rather than trying to get through them. Too many of your students go through forms so that they can say they've done it one time. They've done it twice. In golf, as we were talking about, the pros, golf pros, tell you never practice golf for the sake of practice. Never practice golf without a specific goal that you're working on. Same thing should be true. Never let your students work on a form without a specific goal. I'll usually go by and give my students a goal to work on with that particular form. And many times with techniques the same way. Concentrate on nothing but good stances. Concentrate on nothing but getting your torque, getting twisted all the way around. You know? Give them one thing to work on. If you just go practice, say practice your form 4 times. The average student goes over, they run through it as fast as they can 4 times and they're finished. They come back and say, what do you want me to do now? I'm finished. And lo and behold, don't ever ask them what they learned from it. So, same thing holds true in Kung Fu. Don't practice it just for the sake of practicing it. Always have a specific goal, whether it's one kick that you're working on or if it's an entire form that you're working on. Have a goal. So we've concluded that forms in a soma are good in the sense that they allow us an opportunity to refine the manifold attributes of what a soma is all about. One of those being that the body must learn to accept responsibility for its own action. We've talked about the 5 modes of execution, and specifically for forms, it's perfect. You want to practice your form, first of all, putting together individual moves that you have already previously learned. This is where a lot of problems arise in your students. They need to have a good understanding of the individual movements before you put them into the forms. If you do that, then learning accuracy is much easier. Without it, accuracy becomes such a problem that accuracy is rarely solved. And therefore, they can never move on to the second mode, which is fluidity. So, if you'll notice in the tape on teaching the individual moves, you want to be able to teach the usage for the block is what part of the body you're defending against. You want to teach the usage of a stance, whether it's offensive or defensive, the usage of a kick, how it's executed. You want to be able to tell them from point A to point B, basically what the rules are for that block, what the rules are for that kick. Something pretty specific and concrete that they can be able to recall. If they can't recall it, then they're going to have a problem. That's why you want to make them short and sweet. whether the block is inside or out or outside or in. Be very specific and as few words as possible on a block, strike, kick. But when you're teaching it, tell them what it's used for, tell them what the name is, how to do it, and then give them an example. Just like you see on the tape. Don't leave any of those steps out, because it's important for them to get a good visual image. When you start talking about what it's used for, they start thinking of all these things, because basically most people take Kung Fu because they really want to learn to defend themselves. That's usually the number one thing, even though they may make up something else. They start imagining somebody trying to hit them and then using that block, and that reinforces it. And then you show them an application of it. You get somebody up there and say, okay, throw a punch in, and you use that block. And maybe go in with some kind of strike and punch or something that just blows them away because it's something they haven't even learned yet. And they're going to say, gosh, do that again. I want to see how you did that. Never do it again. All right? You leave them flabbergasted with what they saw. That helps sink it in. So reinforce their visual image by things that you do and things that you say. Don't just say things for the sake of speaking, and don't just do things for the sake of doing something. Make it your hallmark to influence with what you do and what you say. Influence their visualization and influence their recall. That's pretty tough. I mean, but each one of you will develop your own style of doing that. It should be very individual. Doesn't matter. As long as the student can recall after class what it is that you did or said that's going to make him or allow him to remember that particular block and how it's done. Also remember that visualization skills, if they're poor, you're going to have people that are very, very slow at remembering what it is you went over for the last class. And part of it's going to be that when they get home, they don't remember what it was or how to do it. They're stuck. I would advise you to tell people to bring notebooks to class. I told my students the other week, anybody that did not bring their notebook to class had to do, how many? Did I say 20 push-ups? Yeah. What was it, 100?
Yes, 100.
I think I did say 100. Yeah, I believe I did. Hey, no problem. They're there. I had some kids who cried and went home with their mama because they forgot. I had to go home and get them. They still got to class on time, and they had their notebooks. But, ask them to bring their notebooks and make it a point to mention to them. Make a few notes. Be sure to mark off the things that we went over this time. And make any notes on anything that will help you remember how to do it. I had guys, Joe Garcia, one of them, he used to draw pictures. I mean, after class, sit down there and draw hand movements, hand positions, and everything. Everybody's got they got their own ways. Some people would write notes, draw pictures, whatever. But if you remind them to do that, they will. If you don't, we say that in Kung Fu, the students are going to get out of the class what they put into. And that's not totally true. That's only a half truth. Okay? And they're only going to get out of that class what you put in it as instructors. You've got to instill upon them a belief that they can be better tomorrow than they are today. And that they are better now than they were yesterday. That's a tall statement. So 5 modes of execution. Going through the forms on accuracy. Many people just don't get it on the individual moves. And it's very important for you to do repetition on those individual moves so that when it comes time for them to put the combination form together, they don't have to be too concerned with the individual moves. They can be thinking more about what move comes next. Most of them can't do that because they're still too busy trying to figure out how to do the sword block to begin with. Learning forms should be like learning a new song on the piano. You have already learned the note. You know how to play a middle C note. The only difference now is that you're going to play it in a different place. So learning a new song is not learning how to make all those notes over again. Now the accuracy part in the beginning of learning the individual notes had to come first. And if you went down and sat down at the piano and the first thing you did was start playing a song before you actually learned the notes, you would be in some trouble. A song was put together to parallel the teaching of music. Maybe it's because I understand music a lot and I've been in music about all my life, but I see a parallel there that is unsurpassed by anything else. The individual movements. Once you learn to play a particular note on a piano, or a guitar, or a tuba, that note is there. I mean, it's still played the same way. And when you come across it in a score of music, you know that when you come to that point, that's what you play. Now, what's difficult is that you've got to go from this note to that note. You've never done that before. That's a new experience. Forms are the same way. You've got to go from a full butterfly kick to a full butterfly kick to a 360-degree turn into a long-range back fist drop. Wait a minute. I don't know how to do all three of those, but to put them together, that's a new experience, right? Remember how difficult that used to be when you first started? Let me tell you, originally, in the advanced kicking form, I had front flare, flying side snap kick, a reverse iron broom into a floating iron butterfly. Then I couldn't get anybody to do it. So I took it out. You remember that?
Yeah, I remember that. I remember Max Crane, too. You remember Max Crane?
Yeah, that's what I was
Full butterfly, iron butterfly.
Yeah.
And he could do it. I saw him do it. I probably saw him do it 30 times. But I walked into the school downtown one time and Tim said, I can't do this. I said, it's easy. And I tried to do it and I couldn't do it. So the board came in, he said, look, we can't do this. And then he couldn't do it either.
That's right.
But he had been able to do it up until then.
Oh, I've been doing it over and over and over again. They both convinced me that it couldn't be done.
So
we changed it and we put in the long-range back fist strike that you guys are doing there now, which is still a little strange for you, but yeah, the other kick that was in there was a little more complicated. Now you're going to have to try that sometime, aren't you? Yeah.
Don't let anybody tell you you can't do it.
Don't listen to them. Just don't listen. Where were we on forms?
How they parallel with music.
Ah, yes, how they parallel with music. If you have learned the individual notes properly, putting things together is just learning the new song. Now, it's still complicated. Don't get me wrong. I'm not belittling the form or the song. But to try to learn the note and put the song together at the same time, that's too much to ask of anyone. The amount of time that it takes to do that is so great that you go backwards in your progress. And that's what happens in forms. If you're trying to put the individual moves together at the same time you're putting the form together, it takes so long to ever get accuracy down to whether you can go to the next mode of fluidity that you go backwards. You can't shortcut it. It seems like you can. And there are times when I will shortcut. There are times when you can shortcut. You got an idea when that might be? You want to take a shortcut. When could you do that?
Friday.
No? There ain't but one real opportunity that you will have, if you have it, to shortcut. And that is when you've got somebody who is extremely talented that can do both of them at the same time. A natural. When you've got a person who's a natural at the piano, when he comes down and you show him the notes at one time, and he's ready to play, he's already played 3 songs with it before you turn around. You don't take a person like that and bore them by going through these little steps. And you've got to be aware of this, because you're going to have some naturals every once in a while. I've had 5 or 6 maybe in my life, not many. But you're going to have them, and they're going to get bored real quick if you're not careful. Under those circumstances, it would be a good idea to offer them private instruction at a nominal fee. That would be my suggestion.
Don't make nominal fee too cheap.
No. That's true. If I've got people that come to me for private lessons, I charge them $25. I have done it for $25 for 30 minutes, and I've done it for $25 for an hour. If I've got my own students who come to me for private lessons because they've got a test coming up, something of that nature, I've got a price list that I give to them. That tells them, you know, I will charge this, charge that, based upon what it is they want. And it's $12 for half an hour and $20 for 1 hour. So it's a little different. But don't short circuit the method. Because I think you'll find that the better you can get these people on the individual moves, the much easier the forms come into play. They go so easy. You should be able to teach in a large group combination form in 2 classes once they've already learned everything else. Now, if they haven't gotten accuracy down very well, you can double that easy, and then it's still not going to look good.
You should be able to teach any of our forms in 2 classes. Or it'll stay on there.
I might agree with that.
Until you get something like
Just depends upon-
I'm not sure that you can do that.
Just depends upon the size of the class. I mean, if I've got a class of 20 people and we're going through Mighty Quinn 1, and that's all I'm teaching, yes. If I've got a group of 20 people and I've got 4 of them that's going through Mighty Quinn 1, and I've got 3 that's working on the basic snake, and 2 more that's working on the combination form, so on and so forth. It gets difficult. But yeah, if you're working everybody together, I'd say most of our forms you could do in 2 classes, except weapons forms. They come a little more difficult, but even in weapons now, when I'm teaching the staff form, I teach a lot of the individual movements first. I teach balance of the weapon first. I let them play with it for a while, learn to just get the feel of it, learn to spin it, learn these spins, learn to strike here, using the center point of the staff as a torque rather than pushing down. You know, we get all these things down before we go into the individual moves, the collective moves of the form. But I don't teach every individual move of a staff form. Primarily because many of the moves, just like the first move in our basic staff form, which is here, is nothing but a female punch. You see? And a shield block. And that's what it should be. So you just relate it to them that way. It's quite simple. Forward here. All right? Things that are very uncommon to them, we need to go over those individually. Keeping the mind and the body together and then allowing them to separate is a unique philosophy in a soma that we all use all the time, but you're just not really aware of it, or you haven't actually put it into a systematic philosophy. When you read, you do it. When you drive a car, you do it. When you walk across the room, you do it. When you approach a set of stairs, you do it. It's not something that's very foreign to you. But much of it is something that you have learned when you were little, and your body is accepted. You know, and when you're born, your body is doing nothing but trying to gain motor skills. You're trying to assimilate your surroundings and get accustomed to distance, tempos, sounds, and visualizations. I mean, it's, an infant is very similar to someone first starting out in martial arts. And all these little philosophies that you're talking about, they're things that an infant starts working on from day one and continually builds through a lifetime. And of course, as they become older, it's all just bred in there. Well, there are many things that you guys have bred in that we try to breed out in martial arts. And getting rid of those things is very difficult at times. One of them is the comfort zone. You know, we as humans grow up in our society to keep our comfort zones as close to us as possible. We like to feel comfortable because we like to look good. We like to be represented as someone who is comfortable. So we don't try a lot of new things. Even when I was a kid, children experimented and were more out on their own, I guess you would say, than what they are now. Parents keep children at a closer watch. They keep a tight rein on, which is going to make it even more and more difficult for you as you get these students in the future. The newer kids are going to be harder and harder to break on that. They're much more protected than they were in my generation. And my generation was much more protected than they were in my father's generation. But still, through no effort of your own, you have learned to allow the mind to stay ahead of action. And an example in driving is that, as we mentioned before, you don't look right straight out over the hood when you drive. You keep your eyes focused way down the road. And the faster you go, the further down the road they've got to get. And the more precarious the driving conditions are, the closer in they come. And that analogy holds true with what you do in Kung Fu. The more uncomfortable you are, the more uncertain you are of your surroundings or what's happening, the closer you require the mind to stay with the action that's going on right then. And the more comfortable you are with it, the further you will allow the mind to drift away or to stay aloof, disassociated. But there's some training involved here with Kung Fu that's not quite the same as it is with reading or driving, although I guess it's very similar in some cases. Because some people never really learn to read very well, and other people never learn to drive very well. And I can't read or drive very well. I understand that. But whenever people are learning the martial arts and they're working on their forms, you're going to recognize in them or feel, you're going to feel something in them that lets you know that they are thinking of each move, one move at a time. In Mighty When One, they do the block here first. Then they think about the next move, and they do the strike. Then they think about the next one, they see it, and they do the strike. Then they see the next move, it's going to be block and the strike. Part of that is that they're not comfortable with it. You know, they're still afraid that they're going to make a mistake. So they try to analyze each move right after they do it. And in the beginning, that's great. When they're first learning a form, that's what they should do. And you should help them understand that that's what they should be doing. One move. Then look at it, fix it, analyze it, and then go to the next one. Look at it, analyze it, fix it, go to the next one. That's what you want to do, right? Everything else, though, like everything else, it's evolutionary. There comes a point in time when they cannot do that anymore. They have to assume that they've got it right. If they want to analyze it, they need to do the entire right side of the A section of Mighty When One, and then stop, analyze it, and then do the opposite side. Then later on, they maybe should be doing the entire A sequence, every bit of this, okay? And then stop, right there, go no further, and think about what they did, feel what it felt like, and analyze it and fix it. See, one thing that does is it gives them some experience in letting go of that individual move. They gain some experience in allowing their mind to go further ahead with each move. When they're doing this move right here, they can already see this move because they're not having to think about that one later on. They've already made the decision that they're not going to think about it now. They're going to wait till after they finish. Those steps are very necessary, and you need to make sure that you let your students know that those steps are progressive steps. This one, you need to do this one. Let them do it at home, but bring it up in class. Even do it in class sometimes. And then go to B, Section B, and go through the moves of Section B in Mighty When One. I mean, that's the reason that the first forms are broken down into A, B, C, D, E. And most of you don't even look at that anymore. You know? But you need to, because it's a way that your students can look at it and you can say, okay, just work on the right-hand side of A. Go through the whole thing, then back off of it and see where you think you can make it better. All right? Or go through all of A. Or go through A and B. See if, when you start A, if you can go through it nice and smooth, and by the time you get to the middle of it, you already see the end. Or when you start with A, you see all the moves just like that. And eventually that's what you got. You guys can do it. I know you can. Now there's a test. If you want to test someone on their abilities of being able to disassociate the mind from the body, how do you do it? I know you know it. You're just not thinking that.
Talk about something else while we're doing it?
Exactly. Carry on a conversation with them about anything that makes them think while they're doing the form. And then you'll know how much their body knows the form, because their mind's going to carry on this conversation with you. See? And their mind will, they will see the entire form all at once. Then the body will start doing it. That's important. Because that's how you start working with strategies. Pull that over into techniques and sparring. These things apply with techniques and sparring also. Especially learning new techniques. When that technique comes, you've got to see the whole thing. If you can't see that entire technique when the first punch comes, you won't be able to put it into application. If you can see the entire technique, even while you're thinking about something completely off the wall and you haven't done that technique maybe in 3 months, all of a sudden a punch will come in and you will do that technique. Because the body will react to that attack, something that it has remembered, while the mind is thinking about something else, completely separate. So it is important to be able to work with visualization and allow the mind to see it, the body do it. It has to be conscious. You've got to consciously make the decision to do that. So put that down as one of the things to really bring up with your students. Force them. Force them to work on the forms in a particular way that's conducive to separation of the mind and body. And that really needs to be after accuracy. Pretty much after accuracy. Accuracy generally means one move at a time. Okay? So when you start with fluidity, that's when you start trying to see more than one move at a time. There's no way you can flow from one move to the next move if you have to stop on move 1 to think about what move 2 is. See? So fluidity, training with fluidity is helping you to keep the mind out further and further away so that you can flow. That's what flow is. If at any point the body catches up, there's an abrupt stop. You don't know where in the world you are. And that's going to happen. It should happen. Techniques. There's a lot to be said about techniques. There. Oh, let me back up on forms. Nah, I think we're right there. Techniques. You've got several ways of working on techniques. The first thing you want to understand is application and techniques comes third on the list. And so you're going to have a lot of students who are going to talk to you about how does this particular technique work or how does this block work. Do your best not to get them too overly concerned with the application. But yet at the same time, whet their appetites for it. Because if they see that application is so far down the road, they're going to get bored with it. You want to keep them on the edge of application. Distance is first. We've already talked about that. I put students punching the wall. I'm sure most of you in here have done that with me at some point in time. It's an excellent method. Put them in a horse stance. Get their fists straight out like this. Shoulders the same length. And then have them about a ½ inch from the wall. And let them punch that brick wall. So that they learn distance. They learn not to show the... You got to be careful with them because they're going to do like this. They'll do all kinds of ways so that they can still do this. They'll come up with it. The key is to get them to learn how long their arms are with their shoulders straight. Then you can have two opponents standing up and one person steps in and punches, throws a strike. Another person steps in and throws a strike. And you are doing nothing but working on accuracy and distance there as far as no blocks, just just get accustomed to where you've got to step in order to get that striking. It seems kind of useless, but it's very effective. Now, students prefer interactive techniques, interactive anything. They want to interact with one another. They also prefer hitting something. So you guys got focus mats down there, focus pads. Use them whenever you get an opportunity. Even if it's like Howard says, that you use them nothing except an imaginary target that you want to see how close you can get to. So we do that at times too. It gives them focus. It focuses their energy on something, and they will, if they do 10 kicks like that, they will get more out of it than if they do 10 kicks in the air. 10 kicks in the air aren't worth a whole lot. So any chance you get to do punches and kicks at a target, whether it's actually strike the target or see how close you can get to it, you're going to get more, students are going to get more out of it. So use that. Yellow sash test. You're looking for distance and timing. And that's it. Timing meaning, are they able to, when the punch comes in, block it? Now, basically, you're also looking to see if they know what the technique is, of course. They need to know that they're supposed to be doing a push block and a back fist strike. But over and above that, you're going to be looking for distance and timing. Orange sash, as we mentioned, refine distance, refine timing, and add accuracy. Application comes in at green sash. Where a lot of people mess up with application is that they are constantly concerned with getting in on the technique. Now, in slow sparring and in techniques, what we're working toward is a blank gaze that actually sucks our attack into an opening. That kind of sounds strange. But that's what we're trying to accomplish. Our whole training process is get to a point to where if there is an opening, we don't have to see it. Our bodies will automatically react to it. And you're just going to have to trust that. Kind of trust it, because nobody believes that in the beginning. Everybody fights against it. Nice rule to remember. Concentrate on what weapon you have available and where it can be utilized, rather than what's open and what can I hit it with. Okay? And you must make that clear to them. That's something that you really got to do. We have a lot of problems with guys, green sash and above, they get stuck right there because of their inability to be able to flow with their techniques from one to the other. If you see an opening and you try to get to it, you're going to that opening because that's the one that you saw. That's the one you were focused on. That's the one that you were aware of. That is the one that is real to you at the moment. Now, it doesn't matter that you're not in a position to be able to get to that opening with anything except something on the other side of you that you've got to make 2 turns to get to or something, you see? Once you see that opening and you try to go for it, flow is usually gone. Because what's more important is trying to get to it. You may not have a weapon that's really readily available. So you've got to make one available. That's what we call forcing the technique. You want to concentrate on what weapon you have available, because there's rarely any time that you don't have a weapon available that you can use on some place on a person's body that's open. You don't have to be worried about openings. Now, there may be better openings than others at times. Don't get me wrong. But what's more important is that you've got a weapon that's ready to be used. You want to fire that weapon. That's an important issue right there, and it's one that you're going to have to be aware of and concentrate on it. So whenever you're looking at this tape again, remember what I'm saying here, because it's something to really focus on with your advanced students especially. Concentrate on what weapons are available and where it can be utilized, rather than what's open and how can I get there. It'll make a big difference in the flow of your techniques. The other thing in techniques, difference between committed techniques and non-committed techniques. Many of you, because you have been working with the 5 modes of execution that take you through accuracy and fluidity and speed, and then power, you have a tendency never to get to power unless it's just every once in a while. So you don't commit your techniques, you peck. You come in on a person and you are very fluid and very fast, although the movements have been minimized to a point that they're almost ineffective. Okay? When you're training on techniques, you want to maximize them. Get the most distance, the most length out of them that you possibly can. In application, that's not going to hold true. But if you will commit yourself to techniques, you will find everything changes. Now, by committed, I mean that you allow yourself to do the technique with such, I want to say commitment, and that's using the word again, such resourcefulness that nothing is going to stop you. You cannot change. You can change your direction, because once you have started to go in, you've got to finish. Even if the person moves out of the way, you've got to finish. Okay? That may seem strange to you, I don't know. But it means that your individual moves are going to be much faster and much more powerful. It means that when you move in, you're going to be moving in with much more aggression and very tenacious attitude. It means that your collective moves are going to be slower, somewhat slower, but not necessarily any more or less fluid. Here again, that's another important part of techniques that you want to take into consideration with your advanced student, in that they need to learn to react to the situation against the aggression of someone who's committed in their techniques. If you ever get into a realistic fighting situation, the person that you are going to be defending yourself against is going to be extremely committed to his technique. He is going to be trying to knock your head off with everything that he's got. If you've never come across anybody that's done that before, first thing it's going to do is going to make you think. You have to think. You're trying to figure out how to deal with something you've never even seen before. And what have we said about thinking in a confrontation? You've already lost. So you've got to have some experience against someone who is committed. You've also got to be experienced in committing yourself to a technique. So many times what happens in a real situation is that you try to stay too passive. You try to stay on the fence. And a good martial artist should pretty much stay on the fence. He wants to stay right here, not going one way or the other, and try eventually remain on the fence so that there is not necessarily no fight, there is not necessarily a fight. He's just there. Once you decide that you're going to go over the other side of the fence, then you've got to do it. And when you're real wishy-washy in your first attack or your first defensive move, you have lost the fight right there. Once a person comes in and they're aggressive on you, and your decision is to defend yourself, that's one thing. But when your decision becomes to offend and actually be the aggressor, there can't be any wishy-washy moves. You got to do it. Now, I don't mean to say that when you punch, when you've committed, that that particular technique is going to kill the person. I'm just saying that you have got to make a decision in your mind that your technique is going to be so refined, so accurate, so good, that they can't do anything about it. And really stay away from the pecking. And that's what power should do. Once you get to that last mode of execution where you're working with power, that's what committed techniques are all about. That's where power comes into play. You're still going to be using speed. You're still going to be very fluid. You're still got to be very accurate. But power means that you're committed. When you step toward the person, you step toward them with such resourcefulness that if they don't block it, they're going to get hit. And let me tell you, green sash and above, there should be some contact to the body. You need to know what it feels like to be hit. There needs to be contact. Now, it should be light. They should know when they're getting hit. As instructors, be careful against people who come in automatically and they never block anything. And I would say put a well-placed kick in their abdomen every once in a while. Even if it means knocking them out of breath, I would do it. Be careful. I'm not saying crack ribs or anything, because I've done that. But I am saying that they've got to know that it's not possible for them just to keep coming in on a person and not even block anything. And you see, because you're not hitting them, or they don't have to block it, so they come in and get you. They keep coming in, keep coming in, keep coming in. And you know people that are that way. You've sparred with people that are that way, and some of you may even be that way. But that's something you've got to come to grips with and realize that in committed techniques and committed sparring, that won't hold any water. Committed techniques does not mean that you actually have to hit the person hard. It does mean that the person blocking has to really block, because when you come in with it, you're coming in. Any questions on that, on committed techniques? Because it's probably a part that you guys have not dealt a lot with down at CP. And it's something in the beginner classes that you won't deal with. But in the advanced classes, you will. And if you're not accustomed to that, sometime, come up to my class sometime and we'll go through some of it. If you've been there, you've probably already seen us do some things where I have told them to make sure that this is committed sparring or committed techniques.
When you're talking about committed techniques with your students, do you not need to emphasize the focal point to prevent somebody from getting hurt?
It's a good point, yes.
Let them know where their focal point needs to be.
Mm-hmm. And you've got to emphasize that they are here again. They are attacking only a focal point, not the person. A lot of people, when they get into committed techniques, they actually punch at the person. So that's a good point to bring up. Keep them away from the personal aspect of fighting. My hardest part is the women I have in my class. They all want to fight. I mean, it's just so difficult. Usually the women are much more passive, and they learn the slow sparring and stuff real easy. They can't get into this tempo because when they see that opening, I mean, they say, "Man, I'm going to get him." They're after it, right? So you never can tell who's going to be doing what. And every person's got something different that they're really going to have to either try to exaggerate or minimize. Some places you're going to have to exaggerate a person real far so that you can pull them back. Remember that. I mean, that's a rule that's going to happen all the time. Other people, you're going to have to try to minimize what they're doing so much that it doesn't even exist anymore so that you can pull them back. So look at that. The focal point's very important on the techniques and sparring. On techniques, we have another way of doing techniques where a person throws a punch and the other person tries to counter every block afterwards. And you can do that in a natural setting or in a committed setting. And then they both have their place. Are there any other ways that we do techniques that we need to bring up here?
On the trying to get somebody to keep going through a technique instead of doing it one step at a time. I found that noise helps a lot there. Telling them to make the first beat be the strike instead of block, because what they're hearing is 1, 2, 3, 4. If you try to make the first beat be the strike, then they can get the block and the strike in one beat. And once that you've accomplished that, then if you can convince them to trust their bodies, tell them that they need to trust their bodies. And then while they're doing the technique, make so much noise they can't talk. Just tell them go, 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 go. Anything to take their minds off of the technique. Enough to convince them that they can trust their bodies. Then you can get them over that.
You're talking about an advanced level here.
At advanced level, only.
Good point.
But noise is very helpful. You're trying to modify behavior like
A
that.
distraction. Anything else on techniques? It's wrong here. It says it's 15 to 6. Is that correct? Sparring. We've got slow sparring, right? We've got all-out sparring, like tournament sparring. We've got committed sparring. We've got slippery hand sparring. A lot of different approaches there. Slow sparring ought to be first. And in slow sparring, we're trying to accomplish what? What? What did you say?
He said timing.
He said timing. I thought I saw your mouth move. And you said distance. Okay. Let's say that we're trying to accomplish timing and distance. Which one are we first and foremost trying to accomplish? Timing? Or your mouth moving again?
That time.
Yeah, all right. Put my glasses on. Ooh, let me keep them off. It's better when I can't see you guys' face. Timing is first. Remember that we're looking at being able to work with timing, match the tempo. Now, techniques, distance is first. And I'm not so sure that you wouldn't say that in slow sparring, distance is first, if you want to keep it consistent. But I really think that what you're dealing with more with slow sparring is timing, because you're not concerned that much with what they're doing. You should not be concerned with how they hold their hands. You're not concerned with what kind of stances they make. You're concerned more with being able to match the timing. So distance is a little secondary. Distance comes into play a little bit more as you go up the progression ladder from, say, a yellow sash toward an orange sash. Then it's when you start relying a little bit more on distance. You also start working on position of the hands for attacks and blocks and stances. You work more a little bit more on maneuverability. After orange sash and you're still working on slow sparring, and remember, slow is a relative word, okay? Slow means at whatever point you can continue to match your opponent's aggression and feel comfortable with it, that's the speed. And that can be fast. And if both of them feel comfortable matching one another there, real quick, no problem. It's nothing but a patty cake. But now once you get toward green sash, you've got to start working on accuracy. You still got to start working on maneuverability. You want to be able to maneuver around the person as timing. So you've got all those things that come into play. You want to utilize faster tempo, be able to match tempo faster. And at green sash, you want to start working on mismatching tempos. Everything should not always match. Mismatching tempos at green sash. You also want to start working on strategies at green sash. What's a good strategy? Just name one strategy that you can think of that applies to sparring.
Lateral moves.
Lateral moves. Is that a strategy?
Instead of an inline.
Okay. All right. I'll buy that. Kind of borderline strategy, maybe. But Howard?
Drop back, select your opponent in.
Okay.
Jamming.
Yeah. That's a good strategy. Pull back, force your opponent to come in towards you, even thinking that you're being defensive, when really that's what you want to do so that you can close the gap easily, see? That's a good strategy. What's a good strategy?
This might be more general, but I'm thinking about outthink your opponent.
That's very general. Outthink your opponent. Very general. I ain't even gonna count that. That's too general.
You'd win if you did. Which way you're not supposed to think.
That's good. I mean, it's good. It's just that I guess it's good as anything, because thinking is a strategy within itself. I'll buy that. I'll come back to you and get another one. William?
I think we were thinking about playing and met the way and maybe wrong.
I remember what Howard usually taught me about the jamming your opponent. Only coming in, let them in. Soon as she is slight, stopping or pause, just jamming.
There are many strategies in sparring. I mean, there are so many. And it's really what makes sparring fun, is when you start working those strategies. Distractions. Distract your opponent. Feints. Act like you're going to kick low and then switch up to kick high. Jump in for a back fist, only to make him raise his hand to block so that you can kick in the ribs. The kick in the ribs is what you're planning on doing anyway. That's a strategy. Position of your hands is a strategy. If I'm standing like this with my hands out, he references the distance based on whatever's closest to him. He gets a feel for his distance on that rather than my body. Most people do. Now, a good martial artist is going to let that slide, but many of them they'll relate their distance based on what's closest to them. So if I want him to think I'm further away than I am, then I use a stance where my hands are out. If I want him to think that I'm closer, is that backwards? If I want him to think that I'm closer than what I am, then I hold him here. If I want him to think that I'm further away than what I am, I hold him in here, closer. When I'm like this, chances are I can still kick him when he has no idea that I can kick him because he thinks I'm further away. Especially if I've sparred him like this for a while. He gets accustomed to the proper distance with me where my hands are. When I change them, I can get a lot closer to him without him realizing it. That's strategy. Stepping in really quick behind his foot and throwing something to his face so that his head goes backwards causes him to lose his balance, and then he trips over this foot. That's strategy. Doing a spinning back kick or an iron butterfly kick a couple of times in a row and then doing a reverse roundhouse kick. That's strategy. But until you get into the mismatching tempo, you don't really get too much into strategy with your students. Be careful how you use strategy on your students at the lower levels. You see, you can get yourself into a lot of trouble whenever you start using a lot of the advanced techniques against unadvanced students. Be careful with that. It's easy to do because they come so natural to you. And it takes a lot of thinking and a lot of strategy on your part to spar at a level of a yellow sash or an orange sash and not to mismatch tempo, not to throw something in to cause them to block eye and go low and get in on them and things like that. So be aware of that. That can really get to you. That can be tough to deal with. So strategy is something that we probably need to sit down and go over in more detail at a later date so that we can discuss some of our strategies. I know all of you use a lot of strategies, but for some reason it's just not coming to you. You're just not thinking about them. Because I see them in your sparring. I see them all the time. Anything that you can do to give yourself an upper hand in sparring is called strategy. Whatever it happens to be. Even the little thing where Gerald will offer his hand to pick you up, and then when you come up, then he hits you. Those kind of things. All right? That's strategy. He loves that move. I don't know why. But he does. So that's slow sparring. Moving right into more advanced sparring. We've also got committed sparring. Same thing as the techniques. It's going to be slower, more abrupt movements. You're going to be jumping in there strong and hard, committing yourself to the movements. No pecking. Usually when I've got somebody that's doing a lot of real fast, repetitive pecking movements, I'll put them into committed sparring for sometimes as much as a month. I won't do anything with committed sparring to try to get them out of that. It's hard to get you out of it once you get that way. And you still have some of it in you that needs to get out, too. But it can come out. Slippery hand sparring. Slippery hand sparring is exists in, I know, at least one other style, but it's using your opponent's force against himself. It's whenever your hand is blocked, it's using the force and momentum of your opponent's block to attack with greater force and greater speed than you could do by yourself. Okay? That's what slippery hands is all about. Slow sparring, tempo matching is the basis for that. I mean, it's the beginning stages. It's what slippery hands builds off of. Because of the matching, you start off with that timing. The timing. Without the timing of being able to strike and understand that his block is going to hit your arm at a certain focal point, you can't utilize his force. You've got too much energy going in. Slippery hands means that that back fist strike that you threw at him that he blocked wasn't even meant to hit him. It was meant to gain the momentum for the force of the palm strike that crushed his ribs. You see? When I do slippery hand sparring, when I hit people with slippery hands, most of the time, I had no intentions of hitting them with whatever they blocked with. I have already pre-decided that if this particular block comes, then I'm going to use his strength for another strike. Happens all the time. There are times, though, when a person that I'm sparring with may be really in a very angry type mood, and they're blocking harder than usual, and they're liable to get hit upside the head with something that I have very little control over, because slippery hands will take over automatically when a great force comes against them. You'll find that once you've got slippery hands down and you throw something in there strong and he blocks it really strong, it's like Howard was talking about your body taking over and saying it's better to go with the flow rather than to fight it. It's better to fall than to twist your ankle. That kind of thing. Your hand will automatically swing away from that block and into the person with such force that before you know it, you've already hit somebody. Slippery hands is something that is in the very advanced stages, and that all of you as black sashes need to be aware and be practicing it. And if you're not familiar with what to do with it, then we need to get together and practice. Now, leave anything out of sparring.
With sticky hands.
Sticky hands is not something that is part of our curriculum, although it is something that is pretty natural in some sense. And sticky hands against slippery hands will always win if you're using nothing but slippery hands. Okay? They work really good together, although they're complete opposites. You know that too. That's what's different. Sticky hands I use to some degree. Whenever I may be here, another person's got their hand out, I may touch their hand, and whenever they try to block it, I'll just roll in and strike. I think that's slippery because I'm slipping right in, but really I'm sticking to what they've got and go on in. But I don't really teach sticky hands as part of the curriculum. Do you?
We played with more than opponent. We
Okay.
didn't really practice it enough for anybody to get good at it in class, but we taught it enough that they knew how to do it if they wanted to practice it out of class.
Sticky hands is something that is a feeling exercise, and it takes a lot of practice with somebody else. You can't practice sticky hands by yourself. It's got to be two people. Many of the exercises that we did up here when Master Stowe was up for that class utilized the same principles for sticky hands.
Why do you not teach it?
It doesn't go with the philosophy quite as well. As I said, one of the pinnacles of a soma is slippery hands. And slow sparring is the beginning of it. And slippery hands is the pinnacle. Sticky hands does not fit in there anywhere. It's complete opposite of both of those. So different philosophy. So the application then is different. You see, if you want that application in there, you've got to change your philosophy.
With that in mind, do we try to refrain from using it or exposing it to students, or?
No, exposing it is fine, and using it is fine.
But make reference that it is not part of the curriculum and that it is against the philosophy.
I wouldn't say it's against the philosophy. It's just it sounds negative.
Different.
It's a different philosophy, and it is opposed. The philosophy, we put it this way: the application is what is opposed. Is an opposing application for the philosophy that we have. Everything that we do to get to a point of our sparring is based upon a philosophy and a application. And sticky hands does not fit in that stair step. You have to completely go off on a different tangent somewhere. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't do it, because we have long range and short range. And long range techniques and short range techniques, they're different and they oppose one another. But we teach both of those to familiarize the students with both styles. And some people are going to end up being very, very much short range people, and others are going to become long range people. Now, it could be that you could have two completely different schools of sparring, where you toss sticky hands and short range, and slippery hands and long range. Although slippery hands can be long range or short. But it would make learning a soma even much, much longer, which I think now is too long. It takes too much time. Speaking of long range and short range, there was something that I wanted to bring up to you, and that is maneuvering in short range and long range. Long range styles pretty much say that whenever you take steps from toe to heel. Short range, soft styles, take steps heel toe. So there's a different philosophy there too. In a soma, basically what we're saying is that in exaggerated moves, you want to step toe to heel. Okay? In transitionary and short range moves, you generally want to step heel to toe. So when you're teaching your students to step out in forward stances, generally you want to step out, the toe hits first, and then the heel. Very slight. It's almost flat. You'll see most people are going to want to do it this way, though. And you'll be able to feel that something's not right. Remember, when you feel something's not right, start at the ground. And look at how many students you've got right now that step into a forward stance, heel to toe. You've got to be aware of these things. You teach them that way to begin with, too, though. But you're going to find that in a lot of your short movements, you're going to be going heel, toe. See? Short range. Now, why?
Body position.
Body position.
In the long range, you want to make sure that you don't get your foot way out in front of the body in the short steps. Your body's pretty much over the feet already.
What does it have to do with toe heel though? What does that have to do with using the toe or the heel?
If people are going heel to toe on a long step, go get that leg way out in front of them before they actually take the step.
Well, that's right. Your balance is way off because you have committed total weight on there with no absorption of your energy. With the toe there, you've got a shock absorber that facilitates balance, keeps you from foot being slipped out from under you, so on and so forth. So long range, you want to go toe to heel. You're right on the money. All right, we've covered a lot here today. I would say that you do want to work toward using your blocks in transition more so than in a stable stance. Blocks and strikes simultaneously still is where you're headed for. Blocks in transition is where you're headed for. But that don't mean you teach that way in the beginning. See, that's a little too much. But as time goes on, you want your students to do more and more of their blocks with minimized movement and in transition. Anything anybody wants to say? Anything anybody wants to cover? Our next class, we're going to have some actual doing. We will be working out instead of sitting on your keisters listening to me talk. I know that's going to be a lot more fun for me and for you guys. I do hope somebody will take these tapes and make some notes. Don't forget to continue to listen to the audio tape that I gave you. It's going to be excellent for you to listen to on the way home. And put that into application. It's what we've been all about all along. So let's use it. Anything else? You guys are a bunch of deadbeats.
Sponges.
Sponges.
Receiving.
Is that what it is?
Yes.
I see.
I would like to compliment you on your forms. The combination form, the not input 1 and the not input 2, because they basically go along with everything that you've been saying about the exaggerated movements in the beginning, and then the movements get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. If you look at our forms, that is the logical way that it's all set up. By the end forms, you have very short movements, try to get maximum power out.
And it's very difficult for some of these people right now that are doing mana strain, for example, to understand how in the world they're supposed to get those things in there fast. And how they can get them with so much power. And it's really a speed form, you know.
Yeah.
It's not a power form, it's speed. Well, thank you. It's not easy trying to put things together for something like a new style. It's not easy actually formulating what the philosophy is. And it really wasn't until I sat down probably and talked some with Todd Chin that I realized how jailed our philosophy was. You know, sometimes you've been involved with it for so long you don't even think about it. You take it for granted. But it was a great compliment for him to compliment us on our style and what we were doing. It's a gentleman who's working with us now from China. He's been in the United States for 5 or 6 years. He's a soft stylist. His father is a soft stylist and a national champion in Tai Chi sword. By the way, I've got some of his forms and stuff of his father doing that.
Oh, really?
If you're interested, I'm sure you are getting a copy of it. They are extremely long. One Tai Chi sword form may last 12, 15 minutes. Got Tai Chi pole form too.
How does it look?
Long.
Do it like you do the combination form, you broke it down.
Oh, yeah, I'll be broken down. There's a lot of repetition in it too. Yeah. But, yeah, and talking with him, we talked for 30 minutes and he could not believe that anybody in the United States had such an ideal philosophy on martial arts. It made me feel real good. Because I was expecting them to say, oh yeah, well, it's okay. That was quite a compliment, and I really did appreciate it. But it was really going down and seeing what the classes looked like at CP and how they were being taught that made me realize that we really got to get these things going. It's not y'all's fault, you know. I want you to understand that. I'm not pointing any fingers at anyone. It's more my fault than anything. Before I left CP, I spent 2.5 years getting Howard ready for me to leave. So that I knew when I left down there, I was very comfortable. That's why he knows so much about the philosophy. He knows so much about what all this is all about. It's because he and I we were very tight there for a while, making sure that he could pass this information along. But I don't think that the philosophy got passed along as much as the application got passed along. So we lost something when Howard left.
Yeah. Which was really the concept in the beginning was you teach the technique, and then later on you teach the philosophy. And we didn't make it that way before I left.
Okay, well I can see the sirens going off, which means that our time is up. If nobody has anything else that they want to comment on or add to, take away, we'll close this session up. Appreciate you guys coming. I'm glad y'all all stayed awake, even you, Gerald.
What do you mean by that?
And, I think next Sunday we'll be able to be a CP again. Is that right? No?
When's the quarter start?
September 6th.
They turn off the air conditioning in that building.
Okay. Well, then let's consider meeting back up here again next Sunday. And I will see about getting the school down there. We'll have it open next Sunday. We'll go down there. And you don't know where that is, I don't think. The gymnasium?
Yeah.
You do? All right. Then why don't we plan on meeting there next Sunday, 2 o'clock. And we'll see what we can do about going through some application. There is going to be one more final class on this, which means that where we're going to have to do some testing. I want to be able to ask you guys some questions. I'll probably give you a written test on some of the philosophy, and you'll have a practical test on some of the application. Most anything that's going to be on the application part will be what's on the tape that you guys have got. Okay? And as long as you guys can assimilate this information and put it down on those papers good, I'll give you a certificate. But if you still don't know much more about what's going on in here after the end of this, one, I'll know that I'm not doing too good up here. And two, you're sleeping more with your eyes open than I think you are. But I think you shouldn't have any problem. Okay?
It's not that I am dead or dying yet, okay?
When you yawn, man, when you yawned, the lights went dark in here.
If I go through a really emotional thing, I'm ready to go sleep.
Is that right?
We talking about sex
We're not
now?
talking yet.
Is that what we're talking about?
No, we're not talking about that.
No, sex isn't emotional. It's
This thing's on.
Turn that thing off, man. No, really, when I get